Hello everyone and welcome back to UK Survival. Today we're looking at making fire and using potassium permanganate and some vegetable glycerine. So stay tuned and see what happens. Okay, just as we just said, we're going to be making fire today with some potassium permanganate. Yeah, there we go. Let's find it so you can see it. Yeah, potassium permanganate and also some vegetable glycerine. Here is what I've got on here. So these are two little substances, and I've managed to put them into two little vials. So we've got the potassium in one vial, and we've got the glycerine inside another one. What happens? The potassium is actually quite a good product in doing a whole load of different things. So today we're going to look at making fire with it. But you can also purify water, you can clean wounds, you can disinfect areas. There's a whole load of stuff you can do with potassium. But for today we're going to look at fire. Right, so to make fire with glycerine, with potassium, you can do it in several different ways. You can mix it with sugar, you can mix it with a glycerine substance. This is pure glycerine. You can also get glycerine out of some cough medicines and syrups, where if you look at the packaging and see the glycerine or glycerol inside there, it needs to be a high volume actually inside this, because some cheaper brands don't have as much as you need, or you can use brake fluid. So for this demonstration now, we're going to be using some vegetable glycerol, and then I'm going to siphon some brake fluid out of my car, and we're going to light the fire at the same time with the brake fluid. Okay, so we've got our stump. So the first thing I'm going to do, you don't need a lot of potassium, so we're going to put the potassium in a pile. It's about half of what I've just used out of the cylinder. So I sell these cylinders online, and so each of these vials you probably get 2 fires out of it. Then you get the glycerol. So again, you don't need too much of this stuff, but it's a waiting game. As you'll see very shortly, it's not an instant fire like using fire strikes and things like that. You put the stuff on and you got to wait, you got to let it go. Yeah, just let it do its thing. So I'm going to put some glycerol on now. It's also good as well because it's edible, because it's vegetable grade. You get a little stick, just give it a little bit of a stir. I might put a little bit more on actually. And now we'll just sit and wait. Yeah, so I'll put that inside there. And then we'll just sit and wait and see what happens. We have fire! Yeah, because you see there, it's quite a long wait you've got to do, but once it actually takes, it's a nice little, very very hot flash fire in which you can then get some tinder sort of going. So I find it's quite nice. So if you've got some, it's like a bird's nest or something, where you can put your potassium inside your bird's nest, and then you can then drop your glycerol on top of it, and then just sit and wait, and then just let the magic happen. But what you're going to do is try never to store these two together. And when I post these things out, they go in 2 separate vials, or 2, just in case they do mix. You know what's going to happen. There's going to be some big disasters. Okay then, so potassium is a really good one. I like to keep this on my car for a car survival kit or sort of prepping kit, just because I'm always going to have brake fluid unless I break my sort of car down. But there's always going to be some sort of brake fluid inside the line, or in a disaster sort of situation when you're braking, if you need to brake into cars and get stuff, you can find the brake hoses and pipes. You've got the potassium to hand, so you don't need to worry about carrying the glycerol, yeah, because the potassium is easy to carry, the glycerol is not because the liquid, but the other substance is quite easy to come by. So we've got my brake fluid tank, which is just here. So all I'm going to do is just use a quick syringe. Let's just siphon some brake fluid off. Yeah, so I've just siphoned some brake fluid off, and we'll go in now. We'll go back to the block, and we'll use this brake fluid. I've just siphoned off from my car, and we're going to put this into the potassium permanganate, and we'll show you the difference between using the brake fluid and using the glycerol. There's a big difference in speed, I do believe, from this. Okay, we've just come back from the car, so we've now got potassium again. We'll put the potassium down onto our little spot. So again, I've only used about half of what I've just used just a minute ago as well. And now we've got our brake fluid, so we're going to pour this onto the top of the potassium. Oh. Came out a little bit fast out of the tube. There we go, look at that one, it's so much quicker. Okay, so what you just saw then was two different demonstrations of using the same fuel source. So potassium permanganate, which is my little vial, comes in my little containers here, which I distribute into these little vials. And then the first thing we used was the glycerol, the vegetable glycerol, and the second thing we used was some brake fluid. So I used approximately 1 ml of brake fluid then. I used approximately sort of 1 ml of vegetable glycerol. So you can see, and I used, what's these? These are in 2.5 mils. So probably about 1 ml or 1 gram of potassium. So you can see the difference. The glycerol takes a lot longer to ignite than the brake fluid. But when it did ignite, it burnt time for a lot longer. It was long enough to set my little wooden stick on fire, sort of coming over it. Yeah, so in a sense, if you've got damp, sort of dry, sort of damp tinder, it's going to burn a lot longer and hot, so you can actually get hopefully some of that tinder actually on the go. Where the case of using the brake fluid is practically within seconds. Yeah, so putting the brake fluid inside the potassium, you've got the fire within sort of seconds actually going on. But it's like a flash fire. It's a really hot, very intense, but it burns out very, very quickly. But in a survival disaster sort of situation, it's going to be easier to come across brake fluid than it is to come across glycerol or cough medicines or things like that. So it depends on where you're going, but as long as you've always got some potassium with you, I keep this inside my survival kits all the time. I don't have to worry too much about carrying this other sort of stuff because I can always sometimes locate this. But again, as I did say, there's also water. You can use it for water purification and you can use it for antiseptics. Depends on the concentration you use it and the amount of water, how many grams. There's quite there, so I wouldn't recommend just dipping this straight into water because I'll show you now. I'll get some water and I'll pour some in and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so I've gone and got a glass of water. This is just normal tap water. If I was making antiseptic out of this, I'd need this quite concentrated. So I'm not going to go through the drinking properties because there's a big formula, and if you get it wrong, you can give yourself an upset stomach. So I don't recommend using it as a water purification, but in a last-ditch scenario, a few drops into some water is going to purify it. It's not going to give you too much harm. But long term, I wouldn't recommend it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pour some of this into the water. You see, I didn't pour that much at all. And what it's now done now, it's now turned it purple, and it's now dissolving the substance inside it. Yeah. And what this now is a really, really good antiseptic. Yeah, so if I had what we used it in the jungle for, when soldiers had trench foot and immersion foot, athlete's foot, anything like that, it was really, really good to make this solution and dip their socks into it, and then put it onto their feet. Yeah, and then put their socks on their feet for about 10-20 minutes. Allow the substance inside there to really get into the infection of the fungi and stop it from actually going and breaking up. So that's one way you could use it. Or if you've got a large, open, dirty wound, and you've got some potassium in hand, you can make the solution, and you can just pour that over top of your over top of the wound, and that will then clean the wound and also disinfect the wound at the same time. Then you can dry it and dress it afterwards. So it's got some really, really good properties inside there. I say it is dark, rich purple. It will stain you, so once you get it on yourself, so it's not too bad at the moment because it's quite diluted. But when it's not diluted, when it's not diluted, you get it on the floor, get it in your hands, and it can actually go with a little bit of moisture. It can get quite annoying to get off. But that's it. I hope you liked this video. A little introduction to some potassium permanganate, how to use it, how I use it to make fire. I use some glycerol, vegetable glycerol, or brake fluid. If you like this, put a like down below, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell so you see any upcoming videos coming out. But until then, just remember, it's better to be one with the wilderness than to fight and struggle. Until the next video, see you then.